I've seen guys make that kind of leap. I've trained countless fighters, some on gear, some not on gear. Okay, many not on gear, many on gear. And that kind of leap, usually it involves type of gear.
Welcome everybody to the I guess podcast here with Firas Zahabi. Thank you for joining me today. Highly requested that we did a little collaboration before the fight based on that kind of sequence of video. So you had your AMA, which a lot of people wanted to know what your stance was on the drug testing, and who is going to be using what, or who do you think is going to win and why? Do you think it's going to be an unfair advantage for one or the other because of that? And you had a pretty bold stance where you said Jake Paul is going to be, you think he's going to be on an array of PEDs and Tyron's going to be totally natural. And you got quite a few articles, man. If you go to Google News, you're like all over the place right now for that one statement.
That's just my honest opinion. And you know what? I take Jake Paul's fighting skills seriously. That's why I'm saying that. I think it's gonna be a hard fight for both of them. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's going to be a one-sided thing. Either guy can knock the other guy out. They both prove they have knockout power. I mean, a lot of people are knocking the Ben Askren win. No, that's a legitimate win. Ben Askren has taken shots from some of the hard hitters in the game, including Robbie Lawler. And he's taken multiple shots, and he just keeps coming back like a zombie.
Yeah,
yet he took one hard shot from Paul, and he went down. And I thought the stoppage was actually correct. He was still wobbling. He didn't make the 10 count. He didn't make it. That's the truth. You know what? You got to be up and ready by 8. If you're not up and ready by 8, they stop it. So generally speaking, a good referee will stop it. So it's a legitimate win. The kid has legitimate power. But the reason why I said what I said was, one, first of all, I don't like talking about PDs because I create so much controversy. But that's what I was asked, and I'm going to give an honest answer.
Yeah.
Why do I say some guys are on PDs and some guys are not? What's the differential? I always look at the broad picture. I don't just look at one thing. Okay, the guy's got a pimple, is on PEDs, the guy's muscular is on. No. In my opinion, that's not how it's done. You have to look at the training history. Go look back. If the guy had a major leap in ability, not skill necessarily, but ability, then that's very suspect. Why? I've trained thousands of people. I've trained countless pros. I've been training professional fighters for 20 years. Okay, I can tell you that I know the level of growth somebody will go through, and there are exceptions. There are guys who are genetic freaks. Okay, like when I first saw, this is a very important point, when I first saw Ngannou fight Miocic on my podcast, I said, look, Ngannou loses. I said, but it's inevitable he becomes a world champion. It's a matter of time now. Why? Because he has this God-given talent that you can't train for, you can't prepare for, you can't duplicate, is what I'm saying.
Right.
That God-given talent is not going to be stopped by anybody. Now, why did I say that? Because the guy has his God-given talent, but he's still green in terms of skill.
Yeah.
So you could pick out a guy. You could be like, hey, this guy's got 1 or 2 fights, but we see something. A coach will see him a mile away, like they do when they're scouting for hockey, football, soccer. That guy's got something special. Like, for instance, if you show me McGregor's first fights before I ever knew him, I would tell you that guy's really special. His ability to his eyes, his counter-punching ability, his timing, his reach, okay, the eyes that he has, the reflex, very, very special. You can't really train that. Okay, you can improve it, but you can't get to that level. If I saw McGregor's first fights, when I first saw his first fight in UFC, I knew he was talented. If you showed me his first fights in Cage Wars or whatever that event was, whatever event he was in, I will tell you that guy's really special. He has something very special. Now, look at Jake Paul's first fight, which was 3 years ago. He looks very novice. His athletic ability is good. It's not great. It's not like it doesn't stick out. There's not something that sticks out like as a thunderous power. His mechanics are off, but that could be fixed. Thunderous power it's a talent. Okay, so sprinting coaches have the best saying. They say, we can't make you fast, we can make you faster. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have to be really, really fast already, and then we can give you a skill that makes you faster. Power is a similar thing. Like, for instance, how did they discover Mike Tyson? He got into a fight in the street. He was a young kid, knocked the guy out with one shot. They're like, hey, this guy's really good. Castamara met him, and he's like, hey, this kid hits really hard. I can polish this guy. I can take this God-given talent and take this guy to the moon. Okay, so
Yeah.
when you see an amateur fighter 3 years ago, doesn't have the great punching power, doesn't have great skill, and then fast forward in just such a short period of time, in 3 years of training, all of a sudden he's much bigger, much thicker, and he's got thunderous power. Okay, I'm telling you, he's a very effective fighter. He's a dangerous guy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do that in 3 years, where you started, I don't know if you're familiar with his first opponent. Have you seen his first opponent?
Yeah, against
Complete
KSI's
beginner.
little brother. Yeah.
A complete beginner, a guy who doesn't do any boxing at all. Like, he's very novice, like as green as they get. Okay, like, and it was a very 50-50 fight.
Yeah, it wasn't even that one-sided, given that like the level of
No,
guy he was fighting was like exponentially lower than what he's doing now.
Listen, Paul was bleeding by round one, and the other guy was banged up. They were both banged up. It looked like an amateur fight.
Yeah.
Between two young guys who are getting in the sport. You know, we all started at that level. I'm not knocking them. GSP used to be at that level. Mike Tyson started at everybody starts at the beginner level. You know, nobody starts at black belt. Okay, but you could see that the talent level was good, not great, not phenomenal, just above average. Let's call it above average. It wasn't something so stellar that you're like, hey, in 3 years that guy will be in a mega fight.
Yeah.
So my explanation is that I've seen guys make that kind of leap. I've trained countless fighters, some on gear, some not on gear. Okay, many not on gear, many on gear. And that kind of leap, usually it involves type of gear.
Fair enough. So like, obviously my response was more so to like the lack of drug testing. Like, it's actually been confirmed there's been no drug testing to date. So not only in your off-season preparation, but the actual leading up to the fight, at least in boxing, they'll typically have VADA enforced, 8-week to 12-week out testing or something for an actual, like pro boxing fight. For Jake and Tyron, it's like 0 up to date.
Well, that's all stipulated in a contract. Like, boxing is a very different animal. It's not like UFC. UFC, you have to do it.
Yeah.
You have to be in the testing pool for 6 months before your first fight. In boxing, it's all about the contract. Do we agree to VADA? Do we agree to testing? We don't have to agree. We can only do the state testing, which is mandatory. But the day you're getting tested, right? You'd have to be pretty late, foolish to get caught if the day you're getting tested. You're getting tested on a Friday or on a Saturday. So you're getting tested at the weigh-ins or after the fight, or maybe even sometimes before the fight. They call you in, they tell you, hey, don't pee. Or once you get to the locker room, don't pee. Call us when you're gonna pee. And they're not taking blood; they're just taking urine. So it's not the most
broad spectrum way to test them. Yeah,
right.
So with Woodley, obviously the argument is that because there's such a lack of testing, like Woodley has a lot on the line in terms of his credibility and reputation. I would say, like, if he loses to Paul, who's seen as, like a social media clown still by a lot of people, it doesn't really reflect well on UFC, the MMA world. It kind of makes them look, not as, I don't know, it kind of reflects poorly on his skill set, his elite, history and whatnot. If you lose to Jake Paul, and on the other side of the spectrum, Jake Paul obviously has a lot to gain. And if he loses, were people really expecting him to win anyways? Like, I guess maybe now there's this hype train behind him. So perhaps, maybe there is a bit of disappointment if he loses. Maybe people are a little bit surprised. But in general, I think Woodley's reputation has more to like fall than Jake's does.
Of course.
So I think there's definitely incentive on both sides. But is your pushback to that more so that Woodley doesn't need anything? Like you mentioned how like they both know there's no drug testing essentially. So like, why would they not both be doing something?
Well, the thing is, I don't think Woodley does it. I'll tell you why. Okay, because he has receipts. Okay, we've seen him train and fight for over 10 years, and his progress has been steady. This guy's been training his entire life. Don't forget, like, if you show me a guy who's really, really skilled, really, really powerful, really, really explosive, and you tell me, hey, he got there in a short period of time, I think that's suspect. If you tell me he's been training since he's born, since he's Tyron's been wrestling since he's 6 years old. Okay, and it's a very grueling sport, wrestling. Like, they build athleticism. It's not uncommon to have a physique like Tyron in the wrestling world. It's not uncommon at all. Okay, so you go to a collegiate wrestling tournament and you're going to see these kids that are specimens. Why? They're in a highly anaerobic sport and they have to weigh in. So they can't eat junk food. They can't get fat. They're dieting from when they're young and eating clean. And any fat on the body is just pushing you in a higher weight class. So they're highly muscular and they have a great body composition. Okay, and it's a very grueling anaerobic sport. Now, if you look at boxing, boxing is much more much more aerobic. Plenty of anaerobic work, but much more aerobic than wrestling comparatively. Okay, so you're doing a lot of jump rope, running, hours of bag and sparring. How do you gain so much muscle and size when you're doing something aerobic? You're doing something so aerobic, and you could say, oh, the guy's young, there's a growth spurt. That's a possibility as well, but generally you won't get huge. And you know about getting big, right?
Yeah.
When you're trying to get big, you're doing the most anaerobic or anabolic workout. You don't want to go anywhere near the catabolic workouts, right? Now, look, his first training camp was in Big Bear. Okay, he's training with Shane Mosley. Are you familiar with Shane Mosley?
Vaguely, but yeah.
Okay, Shane Mosley is notorious in boxing for getting caught. Once upon a time, there's a huge fiasco. He got caught for steroids and EPO. Okay, and he was working with Victor Conte. He tried to say that he didn't know Victor Conte was giving him steroids. He was giving him EPO. And then after that, he recanted that in court, saying, I admit it, I knew what it was, etc. You could look it up. I'm sure you could do plenty of videos on this, but it was a major, major scandal. He beat De La Hoya. De La Hoya was one of the top fighters to ever box. And Mosley beat him, and it was a very, very close fight. He won a split decision. Turned out he busted for PEDs. And that was also a guy working with Jake Paul. So for me, like, I know he's working with that guy. He's training in Big Bear. He went from that fight, his first amateur fight, looking very average and normal, to his first pro fight, looking much bigger, stronger, explosive, knocking a guy down who was much, much better than the first guy he fought.
Yeah,
and we're talking about a year turnaround here. And he's bigger in size, more explosive, just like a whole different caliber of muscle quality. And that tells me, look, I know what goes on in Big Bear. Like, I'm not crazy. Like, I've been in the fight game for a long time.
Yeah,
you don't go train at altitude to get huge. When you train at altitude, you actually get smaller. Why? Because I don't know if you ever trained at altitude, but it's much harder on the cardiovascular system. Your heart has to work faster. So if you run, it's like if you run a mile, it's like you run 1.5 miles. Like, it's much more catabolic. Much more catabolic than anything else. So you lose weight. It's a great place to lose weight, lose size.
Right.
So, I mean, there's a lot of drugs in all sports, but definitely there's a lot of drugs in combat sports. Now, am I saying I know the guy did it? No, I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just saying, in my opinion, to go from A to B in that short period of time, it's very difficult.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page as far as Jake Paul. I just think knowingly, I don't know, I can just imagine in Woodley's head, he knows how ridiculous it would look if he loses this, if he gets knocked out, whatever it is, even if he's getting paid a large sum of money, it doesn't reflect well on him in any capacity where he has any kind of excuse other than I got, laid out by a clownish YouTuber, what a lot of people are going to see it as. Yeah. So like, you still think with all that being said, even if historically he's, clean as a whistle, according to USADA, you don't think he would be deploying any sort of assistance, despite the fact that he's just as aware as Jake Paul that there's nothing stopping him from doing it.
When you have a lifetime of training, you have that confidence because his life is fighting. You have to understand, like, he's not scared of Jake Paul at all. Like, he's fought guys. Every guy who's ever fought Woodley, has had at least minimum 10 years of training. In the last 10 years, all of Woodley's opponents have had at least 10 years of training. They were all expert fighters, like guys who've been trained since they can walk. Okay, 10 years is it's a small amount. They've been training 15 years plus. Okay, he fought Wonderboy. Wonderboy's been training since the age of 3. He fought Kamaru Usman, who's been wrestling, his entire life. He's fought Gilbert Burns. Like, he's fought guys who are world champion in different arts, in different sports. He's fought monsters. So I don't think he would be like, hey, this time I'm going to get on gear because this guy's really scary. No, I don't think so. I don't think he would go there. You have to understand, he's been hit by the who's who.
Right.
He's been in there with, guys who would. But again, MMA is even scarier because I'll tell you something. MMA, you're allowed to elbow the guy. You're allowed to kick the guy in the neck with your shin bone. You're allowed to knee his face. I mean, you're allowed to grab the guy his head and knee him in the face. Like, it's a scary sport.
Yeah.
If he went through all that, I don't think he's gonna freak out because he's in a boxing match, to be honest with you. Like, I don't think he would get so overwhelmed by this. I mean, the guy's fought everywhere, and he's fought the who's who. So
Fair enough. One thing I wanted to run by you is, so I just put in the chat box. I don't know if you're able to click on that link that I just sent
Yeah.
you. It goes to Instagram.
Okay.
Okay. Let me know if it opens up. I'm not sure if you're logged in through your desktop to Instagram to be able to see it.
I'm not even sure I can log in. Okay, here. Yeah, it opened.
Oh, it
Hit
did?
list.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it
So
opened.
this is Jake Paul's purported hit list, where he has his first 3 opponents crossed off, and then he has Woodley next. And then after that, he has Canelo Alvarez, Nate or Nick Diaz, Kamaru Usman, Tommy Fury, Tyson Fury's half brother, McGregor, KSI, Gervonta Davis, and then Logan Paul with a question mark beside it. So
Listen, I gotta say,